Summarizing week one of the new Trump administration would take hours. As you well know, we don't have hours. But here are some of the biggest headlines. America's definition of legal immigration and its protections now under sweeping review. Enforcement of laws against illegal immigration now stricter than the first Trump administration. There's been greenlighting of fossil fuel exploration and use, also more aggressive than the first Trump time around. There's a new emphasis on cutting taxes, building artificial intelligence, and accelerating the use of Bitcoin and other digital currencies, using the federal government's power to expand all of those. And then within a federal government, new strident hostility to diversity, equity, inclusion. That will clearly echo through the 2 million-member federal workforce and quite likely send shudders through the private sector. Also, blanket pardons for even the most violent and unrepentant of the January 6th rioters. And just today, President Trump said he wants to close down the Federal Emergency Management Agency.
I'll also be signing an executive order to begin the process of fundamentally reforming and overhauling FEMA, or maybe getting rid of FEMA. I think, frankly, FEMA is not good.
Those remarks, as natural disasters, as we all know, have become more frequent and more costly. Now, much more than this happened in week number one. But on these topics, we will do our best to cover and review them all. Camilo Montoya-Galvez starts us off. Weijia Jiang at the White House. Camilo's here with me. Weijia's at the White House. Camilo first. What's the latest on the immigration front?
Well, we are now getting striking images, Major, on how the Trump administration is implementing the president's long-anticipated crackdown on illegal immigration and really immigration across the board. The White House has put out video and images of the new troops at the border helping Customs and Border Protection erect border barriers to repel illegal crossings. That was a multi-billion-dollar project that the Biden administration had halted. Now it is back up and running. We have also seen now images of Guatemalan migrants who cross into the U.S. illegally being deported back to their home country on Department of Defense military aircraft. That is a huge change because typically Immigration and Customs Enforcement has used its own planes to deport people to Mexico or to other countries across the world, including to Guatemala. So we are already seeing the striking images behind this crackdown. On a policy level, we also know that now the administration is moving swiftly to try to deputize state and local law enforcement to help the administration carry out immigration arrests, giving them the authority to act as immigration officers and to enforce federal immigration law. And they are seeking to also grant the same powers to several Justice Department law enforcement agencies like the DEA, ATF, and FBI.
Camilo, what do we know about the number of those deported and whether or not they all fall into a category that the president repeatedly refers to as hardened criminals?
Well, the White House has said that since the president took office, hundreds of people have been deported to Mexico or other countries. That is not necessarily out of the ordinary. It is pretty routine. The Biden administration was also deporting hundreds of people on a weekly basis, especially from the U.S.-Mexico border, recent border crossers. It is a combination of people who are recently crossing the U.S.-Mexico border, who are no longer allowed to request asylum under another directive by President Trump, and also people who are being arrested in so-called sanctuary jurisdictions across the country like Chicago, New York, and Denver, and who in many cases have criminal records. So it is a combination of people who are being arrested in the interior of the country, but also recently arrived immigrants at the border.
Camilo, one other thing, sensitive areas. Talk about them and what the Trump administration is doing that is new as regards to activity from immigration officials in so-called sensitive areas.
Sure. So for the past 10 years or so, ICE has been prohibited generally from carrying out immigration arrests in so-called sensitive locations. That includes schools, churches, other places of worship, and also public demonstrations like rallies, as well as hospitals and other healthcare facilities, because the idea is that if you do make immigration arrests at these locations, that sends a chilling effect that deters people from accessing critical social services. But the Trump administration now has rescinded those limits and has given ICE the authority now to arrest immigrants who are in the country illegally at these locations, including schools. And obviously, that is fueling a lot of anxiety and concern among many immigrant communities. The Trump administration, however, is saying that this will only be used on a case-by-case basis, and particularly to target people who are serious offenders. But that is still to be determined, of course.
And according to the administration, such enforcement activities haven't occurred yet. They
That's
could,
right.
but
Yeah.
haven't yet.
That's right. Yep.
So reports that maybe they have in one jurisdiction or another, double check your local news media outlet and sources, because there's a dispute about whether it has or hasn't. Camilo
That's right.
Montoya-Galvez, always a pleasure. Thank you very much. I want to go to Weijia Jiang at the White House. So the first trip outside of Washington, D.C. for President Trump, North Carolina first, en route now to California to survey wildfire damage in Los Angeles. And the president, as he has done every single day this week, made plenty of news.
Major, you're right. And today he has put politics in the spotlight of somewhere that it typically isn't, and that is in responding to a disaster. When the federal government responds to a disaster, to be more precise, because he has already made a lot of news during these stops in North Carolina. And as you mentioned, he's on his way to California. And in those stops, Major, he talked at length about this idea of dismantling FEMA, which is a federal agency. And he railed about how much red tape there is, how it takes too long, how they've done a terrible job responding to disasters. And he floated the idea of taking all of that money and just paying directly to the states. And we want to be clear here, Major, that he does not have the unilateral authority to do that, even though he has said he has signed an executive order to get that ball rolling. Congress would have to give him permission to essentially reorganize a federal agency. And when you look at the states that are really impacted by natural disasters, especially like hurricanes, they're all in the South, right? You have Texas, Louisiana, North Carolina, Florida. These are Republican-led states, and those lawmakers would have to answer to their constituents about why they are allowing the president to get rid of this federal agency. But I don't want to get ahead of ourselves, because that is what made the news today, Major, because Trump spoke at length about it. But, you know, there's another part of this that's his semantics and rhetoric that makes a difference, because we know now he's heading to California. He's at war with Governor Newsom there, who is expected to greet him at the airport, even though Trump didn't officially engage with him, according to Newsom, as of yesterday. So we'll be watching closely, Major, how this all comes to a boil.
And as you said, Weijia, and this is a really important point, Congress would have to have the final word on whatever reorganization occurs of FEMA. There is a request that's coming from North Carolina for an extra $20 billion in assistance to help those struck hardest by Hurricane Helene. There will be a multi-billion-dollar request from California to assist those in Los Angeles, and those dollars are going to flow through FEMA to both of those places.
Exactly. And today, the president actually said, you know, he is eager to help North Carolina, because remember, this ravaged part that he went to visit happened to be a very red part of the state that supported President Trump in the election, which he talked about. And he also talked about the fact that he wants to put conditions on the aid to California. He said, well, in order for California to get access to this federal money, number one, they have to have voter ID for elections. And number two, they have to turn the water back on. And, you know, that's obviously in criticizing the way California and Governor Newsom handled these wildfires. And California quickly responded saying, you know, in our state, we do require voters to show some form of ID. And they said that the amount of water pumping has not changed since his first term. And so, Major, again, these words matter, though, right? Because if you're in California and you're hearing, well, wait a minute, this federal money might not come to us if our governor doesn't do what the president wants, that alone is creating this misinformation and allowing politics to seep into something when really, you know, the people of California are just waiting for relief, waiting for as much support as they can get, given what they are going through.
Of course, Weijia, and this also would have to flow through Congress, and you'd need 60 votes in the Senate. And so whatever negotiations the president wants to engage in, California, North Carolina, anyone else, he's going to need Democrats to get to that 60-vote threshold. So the rhetoric is one thing. The reality may very well be different. Weijia Jiang in the North Lawn of the White House, thanks so very much.